It's 3 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I want to take a couple more calls on the conversation that we were having about stop and search and the research that shows it's simply not very effective. And I'm afraid the somewhat shaming realisation that many of the conversations we've witnessed in this field over the years have been very euphemistic attempts to justify the idea of treating people differently according to their skin colour, which categorically happens. You are 4 times more likely to be stopped and searched in the circumstances that we've described on the programme, that have been described to us by several callers, wholly and entirely innocent of any offence, but 4 times more likely to be stopped and searched if you're black than if you're white. And yet, of course, it's the kind of people that helped incite the riots earlier this month who've started talking about two-tier policing as if it cuts in precisely the opposite direction. Absolutely surreal, really. But, you know, we're living in an era where massive liars, often with racist undertones or overtones, up to and including Donald Trump, have enjoyed extraordinary success in the public space. But back to stop and search, the impact that it has upon your life and what actually works in the context of steering young people away from violent crime or the potential for violent crime. Chris is in Brixton. Chris, what would you like to say?
Good afternoon, hello, James. As a legal, non-criminal black man, I've been stopped over 30 times by the police. I stopped counting at 30 because I just thought it was getting ridiculous. Yes. But to put that in perspective, in context, I grew up in a utopian enclave in Birmingham called Handsworth, where my primary school was part white, part Asian, part black. We'd have the local bobby come along to say, "Hi, I'm the local bobby," and he'd stand in front of the school and introduce himself. The same bobby would knock my front door. My dad would open the door and he would say, "Hi, I'm local bobby. I'm just coming to introduce myself. Any issues, you call me," yada, yada. Okay? I grew up a mile from the current head of the Met, who went to school with my brother, and the head of the Met's mother went to church with my father.
Gosh.
So that's the local area I grew up in.
Got it.
I then got a car. When I left that utopian enclave...
I've got to tell you, I've never heard Handsworth described as a utopian enclave before, but I like it. I hope it sticks.
I got a car and then ventured out into the wider parts of Birmingham in the 80s. And that's when it all began. Being stopped by the police, what felt like every week, and not treated particularly nicely by the police. And that transition from the local bobby who would visit the school, knock on your door, to the policeman in the car and how I was treated.
Yes.
You want to know what effect that has had on my life.
Yes, I do.
That led me to believe that in those 30 police stops, those were 30 attempts by the police and society to put me in jail. I have not committed any crimes. I have never been arrested. I have had no convictions. I've never been put in handcuffs. But 30 times the police have pulled me over and wanted to know who I was, what documents I have, what's in the vehicle, and they're not very nice about it. So I've grown up...
An understatement, I think, perhaps.
Right. So I've grown up with a feeling that this country that I was born in does not want me to be a free and equal citizen in this country. That's how I've grown up. I don't go to protests or, the million people marching against the war in Iraq. I don't go to these events because it's triggering to be surrounded by police. I'm thinking to myself, well, I find it hilarious when the countryside people who wanted to march in support of fox hunting then got truncheoned by the police. And I thought, wow, I hope you people now realize the type of person I'm dealing with on a weekly basis.
All the time. This is a stupid question, and you will forgive me, I hope, for it.
Oh, you never ask stupid questions.
I really do, Chris. But roughly, what point in the 30. So, because we've seen that you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. We've seen the response that might be true the first time. But when did it become endemic in your life? So, like the 5th time, the 10th time, when did you just think this is what my life looks like? This isn't an aberration. This isn't freakish or a one-off or a 10-off. When did it actually change the way you felt about your citizenship?
Between 5 and 10,
yeah,
a bell went off.
Yeah, that's the phrase. There we go. And it's never stopped ringing, really.
No, I was working at an architect's in Birmingham,
right? And
I told my white colleagues, I get stopped all the time.
Yeah.
And they didn't believe it. They did not believe it. I was then the dedicated driver on a night out.
Right.
And we drove past a police car, passed in the opposite direction. The fella turned around, pulled us over, and did his usual job on me, to which all the people in the car berated him.
Right.
As like, what are you talking about? Why are you behaving like this? He's with us. He's our Negro. You know what I mean? That sort of wonderful attitude. And why are you being like this? And from that moment, they understood. They saw it with their own eyes, how the police treat their black colleagues.
I think you have to, don't you? Even the most well-meaning people can not quite grasp it until they're sitting in the same car where it's happening, and they know there's absolutely no grounds for this whatsoever. You are black in charge of a car. That's the offence. Presumably quite a nice car or not? I don't know.
Well, back in the 80s, it was an MG Metro,
Not really. Right, the MG bit. The MG bit might have been enough to tip you over the edge. And for people confused about why you opened with so much context about your background, the point you're making is that until this started happening to you, your attitude to the police growing up in Handsworth was the same as my white middle-class attitude to the police going up down the road in Kidderminster. They were people to be trusted. They were people to break bread with, and they were people that you would turn to in times of trouble. And then that got taken away from you.
That got robbed.
Yes.
That got robbed, and a completely different worldview has then been hoisted upon me, where people say, back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, black people, they've got a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah, of course.
That chip was a mallet and a chisel done by society's agents called the police.
You can't, you've done a brilliant job of articulating the depth of these offences, the depth to which they reach inside a person. But you, as you say, you can never quite get it until it's happened to you. You can never really feel it until you can imagine, but you can't feel, can you?
But was it deliberate? Was it deliberate? You'll have to ask a policeman. Ask a policeman, why do you stop more black people? What is in your heart and mind when you do that? Because the reverse effect of that is that black society does not trust or like the police.
No, and to its own detriment on occasion, because of a lack of cooperation and a lack, because you can't trust. And what's interesting about the car points that you and other callers have made, and Cassius and others, is it robs the people who may not think they're being racist of their argument when they talk about crime statistics, because this isn't about knife crime. This is about driving a nice car while being black, and the same attitude translates into the stop and search.
Well, it didn't even need to be a nice car, James.
No, I know it didn't. I know it didn't. But it is. I think it does increase exponentially. But anyway, But I'm sorry. I'm really sorry that you've been through that. And the fact, how old are you now, Chris, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm now 58.
So we're of a similar age, a similar vintage, and it's still there, isn't it? It's still in your heart, this pain.
Yes. I get stopped. I don't get stopped anymore.
Why not?
Maybe the grey hairs.
Yeah?
I don't know what it is. There was a time when I reached about 30. It was suddenly switched.
I don't remember anyone explaining what it does to a person's relationship with their society as well as you've done, and I'm really grateful to you for that. It'll change the way I approach this topic in the future. What it does to your relationship with society. It's why that phrase, which is sometimes a bit hard to understand, policing by consent, you consent to being policed, and it damages that, it pollutes that principle. But that's the best explanation I've ever heard of what it can do to a law-abiding citizen's relationship with the society in which they live. This kind of policing, this kind of tactic. You've also reminded me that my guest on Full Disclosure this week is Neil Basu, the the former police officer, head of counter-terrorism. He had more job, extraordinary career, but also profoundly engaged in the arena of race relations, both as a police officer and as a person of colour. His experiences in that field have been truly astounding.